B. Collins.
Peter B. Collins, news and comment. It's Monday, February 11th, 2019. There's a showdown in El Paso tonight, and it has all the makings of a duel, without the Burr and Hamilton pistols. Because Donald Trump has decided to hold a mob rally in support of his wall and the myth that it would save us from all kinds of threats and calamities. And Beto O'Rourke, the guy who came up short when he challenged Ted Cruz for one of the Senate seats from Texas in 2018, he's from El Paso. He's offended that Trump cited El Paso and claimed that a barrier along the border there contributed to a reduction in violent crime. It's simply not true. And Beto, who's not too busy these days, he's fielding questions on a daily basis as to whether he'll run for president. He told Oprah he'll decide by the end of February. So he is holding his own rally, some distance from Trump's zone, and then his supporters are going to march over. And they are going to, I hope, nonviolently confront the mob that wears the MAGA hats and hates immigrants and demands a border wall. And as I say, I hope this all goes peacefully. But I think that this is a worthwhile counter. Trump has held these rallies without any real competition or contradiction. And Beto tweeted, "If immigrants are good for the country, the border is secure, and walls end lives instead of saving them, then why does the president try to scare us about immigrants and the border and take our land to build a wall we don't need?" And that issue of eminent domain is significant. Trump never talks about it. He just imagines that good Americans will donate their land to the federal government to build a wall. And Trump never addresses the issues of what you do with the border that is the Rio Grande River. You can't build the wall on the Mexican side. Can't build a wall in the middle of the damn river. So I guess you just have to seal off the border from American access to the Rio Grande in order to protect us from these demonic caravans that keep coming and invading our country. So Trump is speaking at the El Paso County Coliseum, 7 p.m. O'Rourke and supporters will meet at Bowie High School, 5 p.m., and then march to the Shalio Acosta Sports Center, which is about a half mile away. Now, it's not clear if it's a half mile away from where they start marching at the high school or if it's a half mile away from the county coliseum. And I think it's going to be an interesting split-screen evening on American television news. Meanwhile, the negotiations over a border package, including some face-saving money for barriers, walls, whatever you want to call it, has stalled. The negotiations broke down on Sunday over Democratic demands to put a cap on the number of people who can be imprisoned by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, those fine folks called ICE. The 17 House and Senate negotiators had hoped to finalize a package by today, but it is stalled. I'm sure Trump believes that by going to the border, going to El Paso, threatening to use emergency powers to force construction of his wall without congressional approval, that he thinks that's going to help stoke pressure on the congressional committee to cough up a solution. And, of course, the big guessing game is this committee could come up with a real nice and hard-fought compromise, and they have no idea if Trump will approve it and sign it into law in time to prevent another partial government shutdown effective this Friday at midnight. So the issue over the number of detention beds, this is something I support. First of all, we know that most of the ICE detention facilities are run by corporate prison operators, and they have guaranteed payments per bed, whether that bed is occupied or not. And also, a cap on ICE detention beds says Congresswoman Lucille Roybal-Allard of California. It'll force the Trump administration to prioritize deportation for criminals and people who pose real security threats, not law-abiding immigrants who are contributing to our country. So it looks like they're willing to cough up as much as $2 billion for border security, and they're, kind of trying to hash out whether that really means a wall or the steel plates that the president talks about at times. I mean, it's so comical. It really is. And to see this occupy so much time when we know that Republicans don't really want to resolve the critical issues of immigration. They get too much benefit, too many contributions, too much support from Americans who are prone to be pandered to on this issue. And I'm glad to see the two governors of states that did contribute National Guard troops to this diversionary deployment at the border over the last year or so. The new governor of New Mexico, Michelle Lujan Grisham, announced last week a partial withdrawal. New Mexico will not take part in the president's charade of border fear-mongering by misusing our diligent National Guard troops. And here in California, our new governor, Gavin Newsom, leaked or released a copy of his State of the State message that he'll deliver tomorrow, in which he will announce the redeployment of National Guard troops that Governor Jerry Brown begrudgingly approved the request from Trump last April and sent 360 Californians to twiddle their thumbs at the border. And Gavin Newsom is adding some hot rhetoric. He said he wants to redeploy them to prepare for wildfires and do other things, rather than bolster President Trump's response to, quote, a manufactured immigration crisis. His speech text says that he's going to say that the border crisis is a manufactured crisis and California will not be a part of this political theater. This is our answer to the White House. No more division, xenophobia, or nativism. You go, Gavin. You go. And just to show how the Trump illness, the virus, is spreading around the world, Viktor Orban, who is the strongman now running Hungary, he has been brutal toward the refugees and migrants who've tried to transit his country, some who want to stay there. And so he is calling on good and honorable sons and daughters of Hungary to have more babies. Yes, nationalism is his outcome here. And of course, this is so irresponsible at a time where climate change threatens human extinction on the planet. But of course, these kinds of politicians are calculating only in the short term. Offering, for example, if a family has 4 children, the government will give an $8,000 subsidy to a 7-seat vehicle. And for women under age 40 who are marrying for the first time, they get a low-interest loan of $35,000. Wow, that's an incentive to make more babies. Today I'm releasing a powerful first-person account of what it's like to be a victim of human trafficking. When Trump goes to the border to El Paso tonight, I know he'll talk about trying to protect women who make the difficult journey from Central and South America, and he uses false numbers of claims of sexual assault on those women in transit. He'll also talk about drugs, most of which come in at the official ports of entry, not over the unregulated portions of the border. And he's going to talk about human trafficking, as if it only occurs from people who are brought into our country illegally. And we're going to blow up some of those myths. I encourage you to listen to this very, very emotional interview with Elizabeth Quiroz. She had a troubled childhood. Her mom and her grandmother both involved in drugs and gangs. If you call her home life a home, well, you and I wouldn't recognize it. She attempted suicide, as she'll describe here in this excerpt in a moment. Then she ran away from foster care at the age of 14. And she was in and out of jail she was slanging, banging, and using drugs, mostly meth. And it wasn't until the age of 27 that she pulled herself together. And in the last 7 or 8 years, Elizabeth Quiroz has used these second chances. She got one of the coveted pardons from Governor Jerry Brown before he left office. It came to her this past Christmas Eve. But listen to this excerpt of her describing her childhood and what led her to be trafficked as a sex worker and a drug worker for many years. I understand that you attempted suicide several times as a child.
Yes. So when I got with my mom, me and her used to get into it a lot, and I feel like that she didn't like me as well. That's what I felt because of what she went through with her mom. Mm-hmm. And so I was a cutter. I used to cut my arms a lot. I would try to put belts around my neck so I can pass out. I would sniff nail polish. I would do things so I can take my own life away because I wasn't happy. Like, I just wanted somebody to love me, and I felt like if I was hurt, if I disappeared, that they will come looking for me. That's the type I was looking for, that love. Yeah. And so my dad wasn't around at all. I mean, he came here and there, but every time he would come, I would latch onto him, and then he would leave, and that would break my heart every time because I wanted my dad to save me and be there for me, but he wasn't. Mm-hmm. And so there was times my mom did tactics with me too. She would make me take a bath, and when I would get out of the bath, I would be with no clothes on, naked and wet, and so she would whip me, and that would leave me welts all over my body with the belt. And so and then when she did stuff like that, it was like a tactic to me, And then she also did other times she'll throw something at me. She'll throw plates, brushes, whatever she can grab to throw at me. And there was times I had bruises all up and down my leg when I went to school, but I would hide it. And so, but I showed my neighbors, the kids in my block, and nobody really said anything about it, what was going on. Mm-hmm. And so it got pretty bad at the age of 14. She poured chemicals on me and in my mouth, and it burned my skin. So I ended up calling the cops on her. And at that time, law enforcement wasn't as strong when it came to stuff like that. Yeah. Now they'll send you'll go to jail. But at that time, it wasn't that bad to them. So they went ahead and referred us to the social workers, and they put me in the foster care system.
I'm releasing the full interview with Elizabeth Quiroz today to my subscribers at peterbcollins.com. You can find it at iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, and Stitcher. And it is a powerful interview. And it is inspiring when you see how Elizabeth Quiroz turned her life around. The podcasts are all made possible by listeners like you who support my work with subscriptions. And from Switzerland, Olivier de Mirlou has renewed his annual subscription. I am very grateful, and Olivier sends me a lot of great information. Also, Benny Alto in Oregon, and Suzanne Bowen here in California, Aidan McAleer. They're all monthly contributors. I invite you to join in. All you have to do is visit peterbcollins.com. You click on the menu button, then click on Become a Subscriber. You land on the sign-up page, and there your options are right in front of you. $5, $10, $20 a month, or the $50 annual subscription. And we do have a 24-hour pass. If you're a new listener and you want to check out a specific podcast like the interview with Elizabeth Quiroz, it's just $1. In any event, those are your options, plus the $50 annual subscription. On Wednesday, we'll be announcing an exciting new bonus gift for people who take out a new annual subscription from anywhere here in the U.S. So I do appreciate your support, and I hope you will keep it coming. Sunday's New York Times included a op-ed piece in the weekly review section written by their op-ed columnist Bret Stephens. And Bret Stephens formerly was the editor of the Jerusalem Post. So he is quite a staunch supporter of the State of Israel. And he recounts in a lengthy opinion piece what he calls the progressive assault on Israel. And he falsely tries to explain the motivation of people like me, who criticize the State of Israel, who do not believe that it shouldn't exist, but who believe that we have outsized support for Israel in the U.S. government and in our foreign policy. And that's why I support boycott, divestment, and sanctions. But Bret Stephens thinks that just by default, that I hate Jews. He writes, all of this is profoundly unsettling to a Jewish community that has generally seen the Democratic Party as its political home. And he's talking about the arrival of two women, Rashida Tlaib from Detroit and Ilhan Omar of Minnesota. More on Omar in a moment. So he goes on to say, it's not because American Jews are unfamiliar with the radical left's militant hostility toward the Jewish state. That's been true for decades. Nor is it because American Jews are suddenly tilting right. Some 76% voted for Democrats in the midterms. How did this happen? He asks in a kind of mock sense of balance and fairness. The progressive answer is straightforward. Israel and its supporters, they say, did this to themselves. More than a half-century of occupation of Palestinian territories is a massive injustice that fair-minded people can no longer ignore, especially given America's financial support for Israel. Continued settlement expansion in the West Bank proves Israel has no interest in making peace on equitable terms. An endless occupation makes Israel's vaunted democracy less about Jewish self-determination than it is about ethnic subjugation. Well, of course, he doesn't believe any of that stuff. He says it would be damning if this is true or even half true. It's not. And so he can read my mind. He knows the motives that I have for trying to advocate for changes in policies of the Jewish government of the State of Israel. And it is a Jewish government. Yes, there are minority representatives in the Knesset, but they have absolutely no power. It is window dressing. And he goes through a bunch of arguments. The deeper flaw in progressive thinking on Israel isn't that it rests on a faulty factual foundation. It's that its core intellectual assumptions are wrong and rotten. So I'm wrong and I'm rotten. And Bret Stephens knows best. And this is the hubris, the arrogance, combined with the victimization that prominent Jewish elected leaders and media figures use to try to silence me and Ilhan Omar. So then last night, while I was watching the Grammys, and, it was okay. I really liked Her, and then I learned that Her, H-E-R, is from here in the Bay Area, in Vallejo. Anyway, during the Grammys, a tweet storm broke out. It started with Glenn Greenwald, who was defending Omar and Tlaib from attacks by the top Republican leader in the House, Kevin McCarthy, who wants to investigate them for alleged anti-Semitic comments. And Greenwald started this with, it's stunning how much time U.S. political leaders spend defending a foreign nation, even if it means attacking free speech rights of Americans. And Omar responded to that. It's all about the Benjamins, baby. And then a few musical notes in an emoji. This was followed by a woman from The Forward, a Jewish publication. We would love to know who Ilhan, you know who I mean, Omar, who she thinks is paying American politicians to be pro-Israel, though I think I can guess. Bad form, Congresswoman. That's the second anti-Semitic trope you've tweeted. Now, before I go any further, I want to comment on this use of the phrase anti-Semitic trope, because it is the talking point that is common to all the people who have piled on denouncing Omar for blurting out the truth. So Omar then responded with the single word AIPAC. And then the same woman who engaged her from The Forward says, please learn how to talk about Jews in a non-anti-Semitic way. Sincerely, American Jews. Now, mentioning AIPAC is by default anti-Semitic. This is insulting demagoguery, friends. And it is aimed at controlling the narrative, so that the only people who have permission to speak about Israel are those who are 100% or 1,000% in support of its extremist government and the brutal way they treat the Palestinians. So then we get Howard Dean, former Democratic presidential candidate and chair of the DNC. He says that Omar went too far. And then he retweets Jerry Nadler, the Congressman from New York, chair of the Judiciary Committee now. It is deeply disappointing and disturbing to hear Representative Omar's choice of words in her exchange with a journalist yesterday, where she appears to traffic in an old anti-Semitic trope about Jews and money. So they take a statement about the corrupt American campaign finance system and the way AIPAC games it. AIPAC is a foreign lobby that doesn't register under the Foreign Agents Registration Act. And they claim that that trope was intentional on the part of Omar. And then Chelsea Clinton took a break from the Grammys to tweet her opposition, demand for an apology. And then somebody tweeted a Tom Friedman phrase from 2011. I hope that Israel's prime minister understands that standing ovation he got in Congress this year wasn't for his politics. That ovation was bought and paid for by the Israel lobby. And so Tom Friedman can say it. But Glenn Greenwald and Ilhan Omar cannot. And so then we get the pile on. Here's Nancy Pelosi and 5 Democratic leaders. Legitimate criticism of Israel's policies is protected by the values of free speech and democratic debate that the U.S. and Israel share. But Congresswoman Omar's use of anti-Semitic tropes, there it is again, and prejudicial accusations about Israel's supporters is deeply offensive. We condemn these remarks and call upon Congresswoman Omar to immediately apologize for these hurtful comments. And so we see the Democrats with no daylight between them and the hateful Republicans when it comes to promoting the outsized interests of the State of Israel. And then we hear from Josh Gottheimer and Elaine Luria, as Jewish members of Congress were deeply alarmed by recent rhetoric from certain members of our caucus, including just last night. We urge you to join us in calling on each member of our caucus to unite against anti-Semitism and hateful tropes. There it is again. They're all on the tropes. And then we have Donna Shalala, former Health and Human Services Secretary. There's no place for anti-Semitic comments. Any suggestion that Congress is bought off to support Israel is offensive and wrong. Who are you kidding? And here's a quote from an article in the Washington Post. The pushback against Omar's tweet was strong from those on both sides of the aisle who believe that Omar was playing into a stereotype about wealthy Jews and their political power. But defenders stepped up to argue that Omar's correct. AIPAC does spend its resources trying to encourage lawmakers to vote for policies that benefit the Israeli government. In 2018, AIPAC, which is not a political action committee, spent more than $3.5 million lobbying for pro-Israel legislation. And as I pointed out, they don't register as foreign lobbyists. And it was the state of Israel. And Benjamin Netanyahu came and gave a speech to a joint session of Congress. It was the Israelis who meddled in the 2016 election, clearly favoring Trump. And by the way, members of AIPAC pledged to donate $2,500 a year. And they accept direction from AIPAC as to who gets the money. That is a PAC workaround. And so you can tell this works me up. It really offends me. It angers me that this demagoguery is passed off as consensus. And what really troubles me is that Ilhan Omar has apologized. Quote, let's read the whole thing. Anti-Semitism is real. I'm grateful for Jewish allies and colleagues who are educating me on the painful history of anti-Semitic tropes. My intention is never to offend my constituents or Jewish Americans as a whole. We have to always be willing to step back and think through criticism, just as I expect people to hear me when others attack me for my identity. This is why I unequivocally apologize. And to take the sting out, she added, at the same time, I reaffirm the problematic role of lobbyists in our politics, whether it be AIPAC, the NRA, or the fossil fuel industry. It's gone on too long, and we must be willing to address it. Another odious statement that came from Nancy Pelosi. I've linked to it in the show file. You can hold your nose and read it yourself. and it's inaccurate and cockeyed. Quote, I support the decision of the National Assembly, Venezuela's sole remaining democratic institution, to recognize Juan Guaido, president of the National Assembly, as the interim president until full, fair, and free elections can be held. Now, wait a minute. Guaido declared himself the president. It was not an action of the National Assembly. It is not a democratic institution. It's dominated by the opposition, and it has been suspended because so many of them corruptly got elected to it. But of course, Maduro took those actions, so they're automatically tainted because he's a socialist. All right, so Pelosi goes on. The United States must respect legitimate democratic processes and support the right of the people of Venezuela to protest and defend their human rights. This was not a political process. We've covered that. And if you want great coverage, grayzone.com. Gray Zone Project, Gray. That's Max Blumenthal's site. Aaron Mate is on the ground in Caracas, and so is Abby Martin. And that's where we can look for some honest reporting about what's going on. We've got more Democrats running for president, more women from the Senate. In frosty Minneapolis, with snow on the ground and on the heads of the people who were there for her rally, Senator Amy Klobuchar announced that she's running for president because our sense of community is fracturing, worn down by the petty and vicious nature of our politics. We're all tired of the shutdowns and the showdowns, the gridlock and the grandstanding. I don't have a clue why she thinks that she has something special to offer here. I interviewed Amy Klobuchar years ago. I found her kind of candid and easy to talk to. I was surprised last week to learn that she is rated the worst boss in the United States Senate by former staff members. And when I met her, she had this folksy story about how she got elected and she and her husband loaded up the Saturn to drive to Washington, D.C. and represent the people. So I don't have anything against her. I just don't think she brings anything unique that would separate her from the pack. And Elizabeth Warren announced formally her campaign in Lawrence, Massachusetts, the site of a 1912 historic labor strike by women working in the mills. And I like a lot of things about Elizabeth Warren. I feel she really bungled the Native American thing, and for that form from Texas to come out just in the last week or so, it shows that she knew more about that than she admitted as it became an issue. Kamala Harris is taking an issue off the table. She told the New York radio show, The Breakfast Club, that yes, she has smoked weed. She was asked if rumors that she didn't support legalization were true. Oh, that's not true. Half my family's from Jamaica. Dude, are you kidding me? And she giggled a lot and said of marijuana, I think it gives a lot of people joy. We need more joy in the world. And she said, yes, it was a long time ago, back in college. I did inhale. And then she giggled and said, I guess I made news. Over at the New York Times today, an interesting piece under the byline of Maggie Astor. And let me stipulate that I agree with her that there is real sexism on the part of American voters as they view females who run for office. But this delves into psychobabble, and it assumes that the only reason that people opposed Hillary Clinton was because of her gender. And they make no room for people who evaluate a woman not because of her sex, not whether she looks like a man or acts like a man or any of that stuff, but on what issues she's running. And in this article, they defend Kamala Harris, saying that she was attacked unfairly. Within 24 hours of her campaign kickoff, some critics were bringing up her one-time relationship with Willie Brown, the powerful California politician, a common tactic faced by women that sexualizes them and reduces their successes to a relationship with a man. But she was dating a married man. Now, he's well known as a ladies' man, and it didn't shock any of us to know that. But her intimate relationship with Willie Brown is public knowledge. And it has to be considered. We're just supposed to look the other way because she's not a man. I'm sorry, I don't buy that. Now, she quotes Nicole Bauer at Louisiana State University. She said in all her research, she had found no way for women to win the support of voters in the opposing party. If a Republican starts out disliking a Democratic woman or vice versa, they'll use gender stereotypes about women to maintain that perceived negative relationship. I think that's probably true. The political chaos in Virginia continues, but it does seem to be settling down a little bit. My reading of the moment is that the two white guys who dabbled in blackface will probably be forgiven, but the African-American Lieutenant Governor, Justin Fairfax, now facing a second accuser of sexual assault. Doesn't seem like he has a bright political future. But to their credit, his allies in the state legislature are at least demanding that there be some process. And they just don't run Justin Fairfax out of office without some kind of a process, some sort of a hearing, some way of determining whether the allegations are true or not. A curious piece was published over the weekend at Newsweek. It's an opinion piece signed by Ian Wilkie, an international lawyer, Army veteran, former intelligence community contractor. And what is curious about it is that it is dated February 8th. But it refers to James Mattis as if he is still the Secretary of Defense. So putting aside that curious element of this, the opinion piece notes that James Mattis has stated that the U.S. has no evidence that the Syrian government used the banned nerve agent sarin against its own people. And it's inferred by Wilkie that this includes the event in Khan Shaykhun in 2017 and the 2013 event in Ghouta. It does not refer to Duma last year. But I find this to be an important validation. The article cites my friend and colleague Gareth Porter, along with Scott Ritter, Hans Blix, and Professor Ted Postel, from now retired from MIT, who have all cast doubt on the official American narratives regarding Assad using nerve agents in the Syrian conflict. And about Duma, I haven't read it yet because it's 54 pages long, but at The Intercept, a reporter named James Harkin does a deep dive looking for answers about who actually was responsible for the alleged release of nerve agents in Duma on April 7th of 2018. I'm planning to read that tonight, and if I have further comments, I will share that with you tomorrow, right here on the Peter B. Collins Podcast. You're free to share it far and wide, and you'll find it on YouTube as well. Thanks for listening.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails.